Welcome back to another episode of Health is Wealth, and thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I am beyond grateful and thankful from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you who's tuning in to today's episode and also tuning in to help support the podcast. As every week we are sharing a new episode of just me sharing words and thoughts of inspiration and motivation as I just share things that I am learning on my own journey of this crazy ride that we call life, in hopes that it brings value into your world today. So once again, thank you so much for being here. And what I wanted to talk to you today about on this episode is one of the things that I think ultimately is going to hold us back from living the life that we want to live, from becoming the person that we want to become. And it's listening to other people, you know? Now, I think depending on who you listen to is the big factor in this topic of discussion. Because I think there's a lot of folks that we can listen to, you know, who can help support, inspire, and motivate us, you know, and help us along on our journey, giving us advice, giving us the roadmap, all these different things to kind of get us closer to that. But that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking about listening to people who perhaps, you know, don't support your dreams, who don't support, you know, these big visions that you may have. And it may not come with malintentions, but, you know, sometimes we have this thing about, you know, seeking approval, you know, from people. Sometimes, you know, close ones, friends, people you know, even strangers, to where, you know, perhaps you have a vision, perhaps you have an idea. And, you know, maybe you've got a dream of a bigger life, of a bigger thing that you want to pursue. And you go and tell someone because you're excited. And, you know, maybe without really, again, being, you know, intentional about squishing your dreams or something like that, you tell it to someone and you immediately you're you know, you get feedback like it's stupid, it's not a good idea. Who are you to think you can do something like this? And then automatically, you know, you feel like, well, they said it was a stupid idea and they said I wasn't able to do it. Then who am I to kid of me being able to pursue this dream, this vision, this goal, this life, this person, whatever it may be? Because a lot of times we're seeking that approval. We want somebody to check off on it, to be like, yeah, that's an absolute great idea. You should absolutely go for it. And so, again, I think often enough, you know, if we listen to the wrong people, I think that's one of the biggest things that's going to hold us back from living that life that we want to live, pursuing the dreams that we want to pursue. And sometimes those other people are our own selves. You know, maybe we have these dreams and goals, but in our minds, we tell ourselves, who are we to think that we can do something like this? Because maybe we've never done it before. You know, we've never gone down this path. We've never achieved anything super great or big. And so right then and there, when there just doesn't seem to be any hope of it being a reality, then what hope does it give us to think it's worth pursuing? And I can get it at times, you know. A lot of times, you know, we often have these big dreams, you know, that sit in our heart, that sit in our mind, these big visions. And maybe because we feel that in life we haven't had the best track record to prove what's possible. You know, as I look back on a lot of things that I've done in my own life, you know, I've made the wrong choices. I've gone down the wrong path. I haven't had the most productive life. So anybody could assumedly think, hey, he's never really done something crazy huge in his life before. So what makes this guy think at 40 something years old he can dream these big dreams and have this big life, and pursue it if there really isn't much proof, over a timeline of history of my life that I've done a lot of, great big grand things and stuff like that. But that shouldn't be the thing that stops us, right? And we shouldn't listen to people to tell us what we are and are not capable of, even in our own minds. Because I truly believe, honestly, in my heart, that when we have something that we seek, this vision, this goal, this dream, it's not coming from us, but it's coming from God, There's something that we're meant to pursue, a purpose, a life, a version of us, for whatever it may be, for however it'll impact our own life, for the life of our loved ones, for the life of just people in this world in general. And so I really believe that, if we have these visions, that it is there for a reason. But ultimately, what will ever get in the way of us never pursuing that life or achieving those dreams or those goals or pursuing that path that makes us happy when we think about is ultimately going to be us listening to people tell us that we can't do it. It's listening to people say, you've never done anything great. Who are you to think you can do something great right now? Even if that's your own voice in your own head telling you, yeah, maybe they're right. Maybe you are dumb. Maybe they're right. Maybe you aren't a good person enough who's qualified to live this crazy life and achieve these great grand goals and all of that. I don't think that the reality of it is that these goals and these dreams and these lives that we want to pursue, won't be achieved because we're not capable of. Because I believe if God gives us a vision for something, it's because he believes that we are capable of doing it. And so it's not to say that there is a lack of qualifications, that we're not smart enough, that we don't deserve it, that we're not good enough, that we can't figure it out. But I think the biggest hindering factor of all is letting those voices win, those voices of self-doubt in our own head, those voices of other people who are around you telling you that you can't do this because who are you to do something big in this world? What makes you think you're so special that you can have this big life? And I think when we listen to people in that sense, that'll be our biggest downfall when it comes to us pursuing our dreams. Now, like I said, I like to think for most part, sometimes it doesn't come from a bad place. Maybe you've got loved ones around you and, by nature, we instinctively want to help and save and protect our loved ones. Sometimes, we tell loved ones, close ones, friends about these big goals, these big dreams. We want to pursue this. We want to pursue that. We want to take this risk. We want to take this chance. And it's not to say that they don't want to see you succeed. It's not to say that they don't want to see you win. But more so than anything, they want to protect you. They want to love on you. They want to make sure that no harm comes to you. And so often I think it comes with this sense of thinking they're helping, but it could be actually hurting, by preventing you from going down that road. Oh, hey, I've seen somebody else do that before and it didn't quite work out for them, so maybe it isn't a good idea if you do it either, And so a lot of times I generally think it comes from a good place, but we have to learn not to listen to that, because I believe if God lights up our individual paths for a reason, I believe because he's calling us to step up to that, purpose, to that vision, for that plan, for that dream, for that goal, because he's chose you to fulfill that. That is your mission. That is your life quest. That is your purpose. That is the thing you were meant here to do in life. So even if it comes from your close one or loved ones, we have to be very careful of listening to those voices that are telling you, hey, this may not be a good idea. Now, unfortunately, too, it can come from a place of some folks who, maybe inside, maybe in their heart, maybe internally, they dream about having a life like that. They dream about pursuing something big. They dream about, going after it and all of that. But, maybe they're too scared. Maybe they don't have enough guts or courage or, brave enough to take that step. And I think oftentimes, too, some people see that flame, that fire in somebody else, and there's a little bit of a resentment, because they see someone who's got the courage to speak it out loud, who's got the courage to tell somebody, I've got a big dream. And maybe because they don't, it's easier to try to keep somebody down with them than them finding the courage to get themselves to be brought up with another person who's chasing or wants to pursue their dreams and goals. And so this just comes in so many different ways. But I believe when we listen to the wrong people and to the wrong voices, that is going to be the biggest thing that is going to hold us back from anything that we ever could have wanted and should have, lived and were meant to live. And me on my own journey, I think about this all the time. I think a lot of folks who are on that pursuit to a bigger life, to more success, to live this big version of themselves, the best version of themselves, to live out these big dreams and making them a reality, face this quite a bit, especially, again, if your track record in your past, I've got a troubled past. I talk about it freely all the time. I've made some dumb choices. I've made some dumb mistakes. I've gone down the wrong path. I've hung out with the wrong people. I've been the wrong kind of influences. So it's not to say that people don't have this, good assumption to be like, hey, you haven't always made the best choices and done the best with your life. So it's hard to see evidence going forward that you think you can do something big. I believe that we all change. I believe people learn. I believe, things that haven't destroyed us have only grown us. And that, for me, in my own case, is what I feel my life has come out to be. Thank to God for that, because I think everything that hasn't destroyed me has ultimately made me who I am now, because, I'm just a whole different person now, a whole different mindset, a whole different belief, a whole different personality, character, morals, values, integrity, honesty, like all these new different things that weren't always there, and weren't always at their best. But with that, I've got new visions, I've got new goals, I've got new, places I want to go, a new drive, new motivations, all these different things. And I believe everything I went through was to empower me to become who I am today, to get me ultimately where I believe God wants me to be. But I believe, again, people who are on this pursuit of success, of becoming their best version, of living a bigger life, they face these things quite a bit all the time. People telling them that their ideas are crazy, that it's never going to work out, that they're never going to be some top dog in some industry, and they're never going to be wealthy and successful and millionaires and multimillionaires, and they're never going to have an abundant life and stay humble and still be good people. And who are they to think that these guys could do something great? And it's quite, ironic how a lot of these folks came from some similar backgrounds as I did, with maybe some troubled past, some troubled upbringings and homes and a lot of different scenarios that, again, maybe in the past track records show that they weren't the greatest when it came to decision making or on the straight path or on the right path, in life, but they became these underdogs in life. But, what I think about when I think about people like that is if they listen to those people who say, hey, you don't deserve to be successful. Hey, you're not smart enough to be successful. Hey, that idea is really dumb and stupid. You've made some dumb, stupid choices anyways. Who are you to think you're going to do something big in this world? I often think, gosh, what if they listen to all these people who had something to say about their lives with their goals and the dreams that they wanted? Would they be the person that they are now today? Would they have overcome everything if it was for them listening to other people? Of course not. And that's why I think the biggest thing is holding us back and will always hold us back is not our own inability to actually achieve that goal, but to believe the lies, to believe the noise, to believe the people and even ourselves who say that we're not capable, we're not smart enough, we're not qualified enough, we don't deserve it. How do we think we're going to live something big? And I think if we fall trapped into those voices, that's ultimately going to be our biggest thing that's going to keep us from where we want to be. And so really that message is this, we can't listen to those people. We can't listen to those voices. And we have to remember, if we believe in something, we need to pursue it. You know what I mean? We need to pursue that vision and that voice. And we're ultimately the only ones who could stand in the way between us and those dreams. So remember, one of the biggest things that's ever going to hold us back from that outcome is ourselves, by listening to those voices and listening to those self-doubts. Thank you once again for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I will see you on the next one.